So welcome in everybody um, on this lovely first Thursday of March, almost the spring season. Um, Tonight we have a nice webinar about microscopes and if you want to get one, how to get one, what to get, what to look for. So it should be a fun talk. We have Hillary Peterson, who's our dear president of MES, um, here to give the talk. And she gives talks like this often in her day job. So she's going to be a pro and it's going to be wonderful. And we're all going to learn so much. Um, so a little bit about MES before we get started in general, the Maine Entomological Society. We're a group of dedicated naturalists from all walks of life who really enjoy being outside and looking at the smaller things in life, mostly bugs. In my case, especially bugs. I really like them. Um, we still have some of the original founding members in our group, and it seems to grow every year, and we get more interested parties joining us. We have a Facebook group called Maine Insects. If you haven't seen it and you're active on Facebook, go check that out. People love posting photos and videos of bugs. It's a pretty good community. Um, some other things that we do as a group of MES, we have field outings. Our first one is on the 28th, um, I think, or the 29th, whatever that Sunday is. I should probably look that up. But March 28th or 29th that weekend is a Sunday. It's a maple syruping event at Charlene Donahue's house in
29th.
Whitefield. 29th. Perfect. So that's our first field event of the season. So if you want to get outside and uh, if you haven't been to a field event and you want to meet some MES members in person, that's a great one to do it. It's very laid back. And usually there's some bugs coming up out of the Sheepscot River. So those are always excited to see and in March. So without further ado, I say we can get started. Um, Introducing Hillary Peterson.
All right. Do I take it from here?
Go for it.
All right, let's share my screen. Okay. Look good? Is we all good here?
Yes, it looks good.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to be here tonight. Uh, as Chase said, who's my amazing vice president, I'm the president of MES. I took on the role of president in 2020, and it's really been a joy. This group really means a lot to me, and if you're not a member, definitely consider being one. Really a fantastic group of people. So the reason this talk came to be was earlier. So let me introduce myself briefly. So I am a Maine native. I grew up in Brunswick, Maine, and I went to college at the University of Maine. I pretty much had an inkling that entomology is what I would like to do. Starting pretty much at the beginning of college, I got really lucky, got to work for both Frank Drummond and Ellie Groden. So sort of in the school year time of the year, I was helping Frank with blueberry IPM, integrated pest management. And in the summertime, I was working with Ellie and her graduate student, Caitlin O'Donnell, on winter moth down in Harpswell. The last year I was at UMaine, the last summer, for my UMaine honors thesis, I also did some work on winter moth. I was curious about what was eating it. So I had all these different things to look for predators, and then slowly realized that I was seeing more activity with the parasitoids and totally fell in love with parasitoids. When people ask me what my favorite insect is, I can't give an insect, but I can say Hymenopteran parasitoids all the way. And then after that, I went down to Penn State and did my PhD in entomology, working on the parasitoids of the brown marmorated stink bug in tree fruit. But between graduate school, undergrad and grad school, I got a really cool opportunity to work with Bob Kula and Mike Gates at the Smithsonian, basically going and through those samples I took from the Winter Moth Project and trying to ID them to species. And the reason I got the internship was because Bob was going up to Maine to do the MES BioBlitz that year, and I was broke. And I emailed him and asked if I could ride up because I was living in Pennsylvania. Talked his ear off, and he decided to give me an internship. So I'm always very grateful to MES, and I'm so happy that we have our scholarship fund and that we're giving folks scholarship for education and things like that. So there's my little side note before I actually dive into the talk here. And then the reason this talk came to be, So my job now is I'm the integrated pest management specialist in the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. Coolest job I think I could ever get. I absolutely love it. And I was asked to come up with a talk to give to greenhouse growers this year. And I was getting a lot of questions about microscopes from them. So bits and pieces of this talk are from a talk that I gave to growers, but I modified it and added a lot more for hobbyists and entomologists for this talk today. Here we go. So why I love microscopes, I went on a little bit before, but I used microscopes when I first fell in love with parasitoids. I love identifying parasitoids. And then I got my really cool opportunity at the Smithsonian where I was trying lots of different scopes there, including getting to use an SEM to take amazing photographs like this. One thing that happened when I was there, I was working with Mike Gates, who's a calcid specialist, and I had taken all of my specimens and sorted them to probable boxes of species, even though I couldn't ID them. And one of the boxes he pulled out and he goes, "Oh, this is a new species if you want to identify it." I was like, "Of course I do." So this is Ormoceras dirigoius. And then something that I always love is how much you can capture just with a smartphone held up to the lens of a microscope. There are tools to do it, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later. But this video I got here, I'm pretty sure I was just using my hand to steady the phone. And this is a brown marmorated stink bug egg mass and a lacewing larva that I captured on it in the field. So I just kind of wanted to see what happened when they encountered it. So you can see some cool behavior. These little alligator-like lacewing larvae trying to chew their way into these eggs. They don't do so well when this much of a stink bug is developed, but that's for a different talk. So I love microscopes, but whenever anyone asks me what they should buy and I look around online, it's really overwhelming the number of options out there today. There's all these different styles and there's all these different numbers and specs and prices. Like something like this for kids could be $10, and then you go to a different website and something that looks nearly identical is like $250. So the talk today is just to kind of step back, take a deep breath, and just do a little bit of magnification microscope 101. And then the end part is the best part because I reached out to MES membership asking folks what they thought, and the response I got back was absolutely phenomenal. So let's just start super basic. Field day and on-the-go tools. I know this is a microscope talk, but I think it's also important to just remember some of the relatively inexpensive things that can just make it so much more fun when you're out in the field and you want to look at details. Can't go wrong with the classic hand lens. Some of the pros is that obviously they're quite portable. It's instant. You can see what you're looking at right away. The cons is that there's, relatively limited detail to what you see, especially if insects are moving around. But this is just great for some quick identification in the field, and pretty much everyone uses this style. A while back, I did teach intro biology lab for Central Maine Community College, and we were having for some of the labs, we were having people buy these little in-field microscopes that have little LEDs in them. They're only like $10, and if you're willing to get both, they can be kind of fun to play with too, and really good for kids too. Next is the Optivisor, and this one kind of comes a little bit more out of my talk that I gave to greenhouse growers because these are great for looking at sticky cards when you're out scouting in a greenhouse. But I don't know, they probably wouldn't be super fun for walking around the woods, but I think they could be an interesting thing to try if you have one or if your lab has one for a field day or on the go. They're hands-free, they give moderate magnification. You don't want to walk around with them over your eyes. They do have a narrow field of vision, but they can be used for some really detailed work on leaves and cards. And if you are doing different traps, sticky cards, they're great for. But I don't know, maybe even if you were sampling with like yellow pan traps, it might be an interesting way to just kind of get down and see what's going on if you're going to need it a little bit longer without having to hold it to your eye. And then also kind of fun to play with. A reminder, I kind of want to get these for the summer with field trips, is just a really inexpensive too, these smartphone clip lenses. You can kind of zoom in and get photos. They're cheap, they're pretty convenient. But again, you've got to keep things really stable and the magnification is limited. but it can be kind of a cool way to capture some photos quickly. It's important to actually learn how to use a hand lens. I used one incorrectly for a long time before I actually learned how I was supposed to use it. So, as I said before, a hand lens does let you explore things up close, right in the field. You can hang it from a necklace, you can keep it in your pocket, and you can see a lot of different things going on. You can check your sweep nets, any pitfall traps, sticky cards, or just looking at things that are on a leaf or a flower. I think you can also play with putting your phone camera up to the lens and using that even as a magnifier. Typically, the most common hand lenses that you'd get, the 10x hand lens is going to be super versatile, pretty much great for anything: beetles, flies, bees, ants, aphids. It's kind of your go-to tool. If you're willing to deal with needing really steady hands, like holding it against your face for that, 20x can also be great for little tiny insects, immature stages, parasitoids. And just some tips for easy viewing. So you want to hold that hand lens close to your eye, whichever hand or eye feels natural for you to use. If you have glasses, you can keep those on. And then for stability, you're going to want to brace your hand on your cheek or on a stable surface for steadiness. And then move that specimen towards the lens, not the lens towards the specimen. So the approximate viewing distance for the 10x, you're going to want about an inch, and for the 20x, about a half inch from the lens. And of course, good light, you're going to want daylight or bright shade. And I meant to mention at the beginning of this, feel free to interrupt with questions or put questions in the chat to be addressed. And I guarantee you, many people in this audience are going to know something more than me, or are going to be able to correct me if I got something wrong on one of these slides. Please do so. If you do that, I'll fix it on the slide, and I'm happy to share the PDF of this presentation with anyone after, but I want to fix it first. All right, and then broadly, I'm going to say there's 3 styles of microscopes that you're most likely to encounter that you might want to think about using or purchasing. The first is our good old classic dissecting and stereoscope. The pros, you get a really good 3D view, really, really good moderate magnification. Some of the cons, though, the max magnification can feel limited when you're working with really tiny specimens. And most of the time you need to be seated with good posture using it. You can get a lot of back fatigue. I love my microscope at work. We have it on a sit to stand desk that has sort of like the crank up and down button, so you can get that ergonomics just right. And these are great for family level identification. The compound microscope is really good for, really high detail. But some of the cons, it's not portable, it can require training, it can be really expensive. And it's typically used for slide mounted specimens like thrips and getting things to species ID, looking at specific details. And then there's all these other microscopes out there, and I categorize this as standalone options. That's what I'm calling it. The great thing here is there's many, many, many inexpensive options, and a lot of them, actually most of them, come with the camera built in, and many also come with a screen built in too. But the cons, many of the options can be confusing or kind of sketchy looking when you're looking online. If you're trying to get any high detail ID, really can't do that depending on the quality. They're typically a little bit limited. Sometimes they need like their own kind of sketchy looking software to work on the computer. And oftentimes the light source that comes with them can be inadequate for a lot of situations, and you're really going to want to get a secondary light source as well. But these are great for documenting and sharing images. They're a really good entry point. I got an inexpensive one for my 5-year-old nephew for Christmas, and he was having a blast running around the house looking at old dead ladybugs in the windowsills. And they're accessible. They're really good for outreach tools, and we'll go through some more of that in a bit. That's all good and well. So kind of a broad overview, but these are just a couple of screenshots of the specs pages on like Amazon. And it's so confusing. There's so much going on, and it's hard to know what's important. So we're going to go into that a little bit. So some of the broad spec features that you'll see talked about when you're looking on shopping online or just shopping in general for microscopes, of course, magnification. And so what this really means is this is how much bigger the specimen appears. We kind of know that, but may as well define it. Um, magnification, of course, is important for identification. So, if you're looking at something like a sticky card, you're going to want 10 to 40x. Something really small like a thrips or a mites, you might need more like 400 to 1000x. But in most of the entomology situation, extreme magnification is rarely needed. Some typical options, with magnifications, like this is again like hand lenses, compound scopes, things like that. We know that's what magnification is. Optical quality is another term, and this is just how sharp and clear the image is. And sometimes this can be actually more important than the advertised magnification when you're talking about things with cameras. And it can be crucial to think about because some of the low cost microscopes may claim that they have this crazy high magnification, but then you buy it and it turns out it still looks really blurry. And that might be because the optical quality isn't as high. That's kind of where they're cutting to save cost. Some typical options, amscopes, microscopes, dynolights, the more high ends, those are going to be where you're getting better optical quality. And then like those budget scopes that you can purchase on Amazon might have lower optical quality. Next up, so important, is lighting and illumination. So this is going to be how the specimen itself is lit. It can be incident, transmitted, ring, gooseneck. This is just an overview again. I'm going to have a slide for all this other information again. And lighting is so important. It affects your ability to see details, and flexible lighting is really helpful, especially for different specimens. I'm going to go over a bunch of different examples. Just an example of what that might look like, a dissection scope with a gooseneck or ring light. Next is the camera and the resolution, and this is how well photos and videos are captured. This is useful, of course, if you're going to be taking pictures that you want to share as a hobbyist or put up on iNaturalist, or if you're sending images to other people to get some help with identification or making records of things or teaching. Obviously, you're going to want to get the best pictures that you can. 0.3 to 5 megapixels is fine for casual use, but if you're going to want to get like lab photos, maybe more in the 10 to 20 range. And then one that you might not think about when you're thinking about the purchase is the ease of use. So this is going to be things like comfort, focus, stability, portability, again, depending on what you're wanting to be using it for. Often overlooked, but it's really critical, especially if you're going to be sitting for a really long time at that microscope. One thing I can think of is the really high-powered microscope I got to use at the Smithsonian. The gear on it would stick a little bit. And so by the end of the day, my hand would just be like on fire from turning that thing all day. So just kind of considerations there, especially if you're thinking about buying a used one. Just know that you might need to service it a little bit if something sticks on you. A little bit more about magnification. So kind of as I said before, it's going to be showing you obviously how much larger a specimen. Magnification is how much larger a specimen is under the scope, and choosing the right magnification depends on what you're trying to see. So the 10 to 40x range, that's going to be sort of your optivisor, hand lens, best for quick ID in the field. And I'd say sort of the queen of entomology really is our wonderful dissection scope here. And this is going to be getting typically somewhere in the 100 to 200x range. 400 to 1000x, this is going to be your compound microscopes. This might be needed for species level ID for very small mites, thrips, things like that. And then 2000x and beyond, this is going to be really, really fancy microscopes like an SEM. This is, tiny, getting images for tiny structures for research, advanced microscopy, lab work. These are a couple of photos I got to take on the SEM when I was doing my internship of that wasp. It was pretty cool because I had already kind of gone through this species with the other two species they had there and already figured out the whole key. But then when I looked at all of them under the SEM, there was just like these amazing different patterns in their antenna, their little sensory organs here. So that was a pretty cool thing to see. This was at 10,000x. Then this photo here at 200x though, with the difference in the lighting, that you could actually see this different color in the mandibles. And these wasps will actually reinforce their mandibles with zinc to chew their way out of their host. So just thought that was kind of a fun aside. Now, the next thing is resolution. So resolution determines how clearly you can see details. So higher resolution is better for capturing fine structures and sharing clear images. So I have all here because it has to do with sort of having a camera and being able to see it on a screen. These are a bunch of just of these standalone options. So the 0.3 to 1.3 megapixel, this is going to be your least expensive. So we've got least to most expensive, left to right. Best use case, casual viewing, rough identification, educational demos, getting something inexpensive for kids to try out, classes, things like that. The 5 to 8 megapixel range is really good for documentation, some intermediate ID, and getting photos to share. 10 to 20 megapixel, this is going to be for higher detailed records, sending images to consultants and specialists if you need closer to a species ID and research quality images. And then 20 plus megapixels, these are your really, really expensive scopes. You're really going to be only getting these if you're a professional lab, you need publication quality image, and extremely fine detail. So that being said, when I was working on this talk, I'm sure some of you here know Ishvan Miko. He's given some of our winter workshops for us. Fantastic entomologist, and he knows his way around microscopes because he does a lot of his work on extremely tiny insects, and not just the insects. He does the work on the structures inside of the extremely tiny insects. So I had a chat with him. And he pointed out something amazing to me that I hadn't really considered. So, as I said, this is the 20 plus megapixel range on the camera on the scope is extremely expensive. I think if I remember when I pulled this scope picture here, I think this was like a $6,000 or $7,000 microscope. He made me realize that if you're holding your cell phone up to the microscope to get the picture through the lens, the newest iPhone has a 48 megapixel camera with resolution. So again, 20 plus megapixel, $6,000 microscope. Your iPhone held up to the microscope eye with a $10 tool, you get 48 megapixel. iPhone, smartphone, anything like that. So modern phones actually have really high resolution cameras. And Ishvan has published papers where the images he took on a smartphone. So just something to consider as you're thinking about what you're purchasing. I talked about megapixel. And again, if you want to have sort of a one case situation, I'd say somewhere like the Dino Light quality, this 10 to 20 is really good. But just remember that an adapter your smartphone can do it for you too. There's lots out there of universal microscope adapters. If you want to go a little bit more pricey, the best tool I ever had was a mount for my phone that actually I would take the eye out of the microscope and the tool would go in there and it would hold the phone. It was really awesome, except for like that tool was pretty pricey and that it was like only for the iPhone 7. So I still have it in a box somewhere. I need to see if I can like have someone 3D print something so my new phone can fit in. And then Ishvan actually found for like I think $5 or $10 a 3D printable adapter from Open Ocular that he downloaded, and he said that he'd print it and try it out soon and give me an update on how well it worked. So lots of cool options there. Also, if you want to have really great photos of insects, Z stacking. So this is where you'll take multiple photos if you can hold your camera steady. So this would be like if you had your phone in the microscope, if you took like 10 photos where you zoom, you like go all the way as far as you can to, so you just see like maybe the furthest foot on the wasp or something. And then you zoom in, you turn a little bit the focus so you're now on the head, and then you turn the focus again so now you're on the beginning of the wing, and turn the focus again so you're at the top of the wing. You can actually use software to stack those images so the whole insect ends up in focus. And there's what Ishvan recommends, there's a paid software option called Zareen Stacker. And in the year 2026, it's a beautiful paid software because I think it's like $50 that you pay once. There's no subscription fee. So if you're looking to try that out, Zareen Stacker is what Ishvan recommended. And, he just recommends playing around with the most affordable setup you can. You could get a small used compound scope, a camera on your cell phone, and then some lighting or an external flash, and you can really have a pretty powerful imaging solution. So we've talked about magnification and resolution, and now we have to talk about light because this is so super important. I think a lot of situations where you could have a very inexpensive microscope, if you invested in a few different types of lights and filters for different use cases, you could get so many different good images and good just ability to see things and different structures that you might not if you didn't invest a little bit in lights. So lighting style is really how that light interacts with the specimen, and different styles are kind of suited for different types of samples. So the sort of four typical styles, the first is the incident or top lighting. This is usually built into a microscope you purchase. This is best for opaque samples like sticky cards, insect bodies, leaves. The light is going to be shining directly down onto the surface. Next is transmitted or backlighting. So on this dissecting scope, that would be this light here. And sometimes they're built right into the compound scope. This is best for petri dish specimens and then things that are really thin samples where you want that light to be shining up through the sample. Ring lights are fantastic, sort of a really great, fantastic multi-use tool. They give even illumination for surface detail on small specimens. They're very, very useful for things in petri dishes, or if you've got something like the jar that you've taken off of a malaise trap, or insects from a yellow pan trap that you're sorting in a tray. They're good for looking down on that, although sometimes they can shine a little bit weird on like ethanol in a dish. So just kind of playing with that light. And also good for dishes with larger detritus that you're sorting through. And then the gooseneck or a DIY light. I say DIY light because again, when I was doing my time at the Smithsonian, I remember Mike Gates. There's all these expensive lights that you can get that are official microscope lights. He had found some like $5 lamp at IKEA was working almost as well. So again, if you're trying to just kind of DIY it for the first time, kind of like broaden outside of the science zone if you just want to get into the hobby and see if it's something you like, and play around with other lights too. These are of course going to be extra bright, but you can play around with things. But these are great because they're flexible. You can put them around the microscope. You might need some different angles to see things on specimens, so they're really good for situations where you need to get the light really, really close to the specimen. Ishvan loves ring lights during my conversation with him, and he pointed out that they're typically relatively inexpensive. I mean, even the Amscope brand ring light is $35.99, and they can go on almost every microscope. So it's a really inexpensive way to upgrade something that you already have. You might be able to see behind me, I've got this little hobbyist Amscope that I think was like $90. And I'm like, I got to get a ring light for that. So kind of cool, just that is such an inexpensive way that you can get a lot more light. Before, he says growers, I'm supposed to say hobbyists. Before we hop into the awesome section of all of the submissions to my questions to MES membership, just some other thoughts. When you're looking at specimens, it's really helpful to have a variety of tools to manipulate those specimens, especially if they're pinned. You're going to want to be able to really gently move different body parts sometimes to be able to see like under a wing. And so just some thoughts on different tools that you might want to think about purchasing. As I said before, different lights. If you're having trouble seeing a feature, think about maybe getting a secondary light to see if that helps. It can make small critters easier to see even in dim conditions, and you can, really see it in different situations. A set of fine tip paintbrushes can be also super helpful to move specimens gently without damage, be it if they're sitting on the bottom of the microscope and you don't have them pinned yet, but you're just moving them around, or you have them point mounted or pinned and you need to move like a wing out of the way. I've even taken fine tip paintbrushes before and used a pair of like little scissors to cut them down to like one hair. The one hair can like move a wing without popping it off. And you can also use them to pick up tiny insects in the field from soil, foliage, or trap surfaces. Also helpful, a dissection probe or a pin, or so many types of DIY tools where you can like stick the pin down in and screw it in like a mini screwdriver, power drill kind of scenario. This can help tease apart, different detritus or clutter, remove small insects or remove features on the insects. Suction tool or pipette or aspirator. If you're out in the field, of course, an aspirator is really helpful to aspirate from like sweep netting. But if you are working with specimens in ethanol, you can use that to move specimens from one dish to another. And then, of course, you need a dish. So, petri dishes, vials, collection dishes, you want to hold specimens safely for sorting or observation. If you work with pinned specimens and you've never used a specimen manipulator, I cannot recommend getting one enough. Back in the day, BioQuip had some, and then sort of the cream of the crop was the Rose Entomology specimen manipulator, and I think they're both not around anymore. And I was really happy to see that ecologysupplies.com now has a specimen manipulator. Still is a little pricey at $50, and if you don't have that, you can get foam to put the specimens in, or you can use like putty to stick the pin into, not the specimens, the specimen on the pin. But if it's something you do a lot and you don't have a pin insect manipulator, these are really fantastic. They're typically designed so you can turn. If you look here, this turns this sort of around clockwise or counterclockwise, and then this little tool turns the insect around. So you can get it exactly to the spot you want to see it. And they're usually like designed to be tight enough that once you get it in this, spot, it's not going to just like swing back and move on you. They're really awesome. More asides from Ishvan, another, a really inexpensive tool that I recommend, especially if you use goose lights, is Mylar paper. I think like a 20 pack on Amazon was $2.99 or something like that. Mylar paper is really great for getting these bright lights diffused. And so Ishvan had a little blurb he published in Hymenopter Journal about using a Mylar cylinder around a compound microscope objective. You can see here to diffuse light. It helped to evenly illuminate smaller dark specimens. And this is a photo he was able to get of a parasitoid's face with this Mylar paper. You can see how evenly that light is diffused. From my own experiences, this is from a parasitoid ID workshop I did on the parasitoids of brown marmorated stink bug down in Florida with Elijah Talamas. The method there that I learned, I talked about that specimen manipulator. So here's the specimen manipulator, a pin, a point mount on the pin, and this is the parasitoid at the very edge of the point mount. So they're very, very small. The method there with these parasitoids to be able to see all these different little features that you need to see is to have the specimen on the point mount and then take a piece of Mylar paper and pin it to a square of foam so you get it up kind of high and closer to where the specimen is. And then you have your lights a little bit further back and you push that Mylar paper up until it's almost touching the specimen. And so this is a photo I took on an iPhone, just holding it through the camera, the microscope eye. I don't think I even had that. I didn't have that tool. So like, this is just me balancing it with my hands. And this was back in like 2017. And I looked at my picture. I took that with an iPhone 7, which back then was 12 megapixels. And the most up to date, like the iPhone 15 these days, has 48 megapixels. So I hope this inspires someone to experiment with taking pictures with their phone through the microscope and to buy Mylar paper and make these cool foam things. I mean, again, I was mostly using them for parasitoids, but I think it would work well for many insects, especially those with a lot of hard bodies, a lot of sclerotization. So just some final considerations before we go into the next part of the talk, which is again the people's submissions to me, when you're just purchasing and using and thinking about your microscope, seller credibility is definitely important. Watch out for sellers that are exaggerating specs. You know, the price is most of the time going to get you more if you spend more, but that might not always be true. People might just put a really high price tag on a piece of junk. So, you know, you might want to consider if you're making an investment, buying directly from the manufacturer and talking to them. Like, say you want to get an Amscope microscope, go to the Amscope website. Don't go to Amazon or any of these other online stores and just type in like Amscope. You might get someone tricking you. You know, budget versus investment. If you're not sure you're going to really be into the hobby, you could try an inexpensive model first to experiment with your needs. Higher end scopes are going to be offering better support and features. So just know that if you're buying an inexpensive model, there's a chance you don't get good customer service. Different tasks may require different magnifications. So depending on what you like to do, you might find that it actually makes more sense to buy two different microscopes. Um, you want to think about how easily the scope focuses. If you're going to be using it a lot and it has a really frustrating focus mechanism that can just get really old really fast. Consider how much light you need and where it comes from. Do you need external lights? Again, with microscopes, it might be better to not try to get like one tool that's going to do it all. You could get a more inexpensive microscope or a used one and then get a secondary light. And, you know, of course, the microscope lights out there are going to be more expensive than other things. But again, experiment and have fun with it. And then, of course, I mentioned this before, but you just want to think about your own comfort and ergonomics. Make sure the device is comfortable for long periods. And as I said, don't forget to get creative. I have ping pong balls here because to get some diffuse light. Once actually, Ishvan and I were working on getting photos of specimens, and we cut holes in ping pong balls and like take them to the goose light. It wasn't the best solution, but it's what we had, and it worked pretty good. And then back when I was going through thousands of sticky cards during my PhD, I would use cardboard to make these custom like little things that my hands could hold to slide them back and forth. That made just life with the microscope a lot more comfortable. So that's kind of the fun part. All right, now we're getting into my favorite part of this talk. I cannot get over the submissions I got. Thank you so much. We have the best membership. I brag about our membership to people outside of the entomology community all the time because seriously, everybody in this and MES is just fantastic. So we had 9 MES members submit reviews of 14 microscopes. 8 of the 14, kind of not surprisingly, were dissecting scopes or stereoscopes. 1 was a compound scope. 4 were standalone options, and then 1 was a camera, which I have information about as well. Most folks had 1 microscope, but a few had more than 1. Again, that's just, I wanted to highlight that because depending on what you're doing, it might be nice to invest in a couple for different situations. So a lot of the folks submitted what they paid when they purchased the microscope. Like one person said that they had purchased their microscope 25 years ago. And it was actually interesting in that scenario. I think that scope used to be $700 and now it was like $150. So I kind of tried to approximate the costs of their scope for 2026 for a similar scope, just to get a kind of understanding of range. So for compound, there was only 1 compound scope, and the estimate was about $500. And then dissecting scopes ranged from $120 to $2,500, with more sort of being in the $500 or $1,000 range, with an average cost of $878. But I'd say, you know, 500 and the 1,000 were more frequent. And then the standalone options ranged from anywhere from $60 to $500 with an average cost of $320. We're not going to look at this long. I just kind of wanted to have a quick overview here. So this table shows the different microscope models, and I have it sorted first by microscope type. So camera, compound, dissecting, standalone, and then approximate cost. And so just kind of a quick way to look and see an overview here of sort of that same data. I'm going to break these all down, but just kind of wanted to have that for a sec in case anyone just like wants to take a picture of this. Or again, I'm happy to share the PDF of this presentation after the fact as well. All right, so we'll start with the camera because I think this is also a really fun submission. So thank you, Perry, if you're here, thank you. Perry submitted about the Olympus OM1 macro photography setup that he has been working on. So he uses a 90 millimeter macro lens with a 2x teleconverter, a Godox flash, and a small rig tripod. This setup, so far, his estimate is about $3,500, and he likes to use it for syrphids, bee flies, and tiger beetles. This is a beautiful photo that he took. He uses the Godox flash with an AK diffuser and a small rig tripod. He loves the high image quality and it's excellent for dedicated macro photography. But of course, it is expensive and it's bulky. He would buy this again, and Roger Ripmaster is who worked with him to help him figure out the setup. And it produces, he feels, better images than just kind of taking something under a digital scope. And he likes to, experiment with it to get photos. I'm going to check the time here. All right, still doing all right. Roger submitted about a compound microscope that he purchased used. I think he said that the scope itself was over 50 years old. He estimates a replacement today would be $700 to $1,000. What he did, which I think is super cool, was the old tube light was getting kind of tired, and he said the light was really yellow. So he used a Phoenix high-powered tactical flashlight to retrofit where that old tube light had been. And he loves that, he has this old scope that still works great after the modification. But because it's vintage, it is a little limited, and he did have to do a DIY modification. But, he said he's been getting great images, and I think it's a really creative idea. These are also photos that Ishvan showed me from a publication of the world revision he did of Platygastridae that he took with a setup. He had a really old Nikon compound microscope that he retrofitted with an old Nikon camera. And these are the quality of images he was able to get of a very, very small parasitoid wasp. These might be smaller than the one that I showed you on the point mount. So just thought that was, again, I think it's really cool to think about getting something old and used. Maybe you find something at a thrift store and then playing with the lights, playing with cameras, retrofitting it. Mark Ward submitted information about his Leica Zoom 2000. This is a dissecting and stereoscope. This is the one. He said 25 years ago it was $750. I looked up the same microscope. You can buy it used today, $300 to $500. He likes to use it for ground beetles and other insects and plants. For the lighting setup, he uses both the top down and the bottom light. And finds a fiber optic light to be essential. He loves that the bottom light is great for wing venation and CETA, and it's limited because the max magnification is 45x, and the base itself can be kind of not ideal for flat specimens as there's no built-in reticle. He would buy it again, and he purchased it on a limited budget, and just wanted to say that the photo doesn't have the fiber optic light that he uses. Perry Moore submitted about his Amscope K104. It's a dissecting scope. This is, I think, the correct thing. I found this picture online. Currently, you can purchase this retail for $120 or so. The taxa he likes to use it for include syrphids, bee flies, tiger beetles, and he also likes fly specking and stamps. He uses the built-in ambient lighting. He finds that it's compact, it's functional, and it works great for fly specking and insects. But it does have a bit of limited magnification. He would buy it again, and it's really easy to handle. Eric Fromberg submitted this photo of his Amscope 3.5 to 90 zoom trinocular stereo microscope. This retails for about $500 currently. He uses it for mostly aquatic insects, including the Ephemeroptera, Plecoptera, and Trichoptera. I remembered it. The EPT taxa. The lighting setup is he uses a ring light and an adjustable LED slide light. I think that's what's happening here. He loves the trinocular for photos. So the trinocular is this piece here and has really good flexible imaging. He didn't really find any limitation from the scope itself. He said his limitations are user-based. Eric, I believe in you. I know you're here. He would buy it again, and he advises that less magnification is better than more for stereoscopes. It's highly usable for regular research. Roger also submitted about kind of the same thing. He has a dissecting scope that's over 50 years old that he's found he is able to use really well by retrofitting it with a ring light. And he has found that it's just fully functional after decades and decades. It's old equipment, but otherwise he really doesn't find any limitations. Jim Lebont submitted about his Amscope 2 to 225x trinocular stereo zoom. The current retail for a similar model is somewhere around $1,000. He uses it for carabids, especially anilines. He uses a ring light and occasionally a dual wand fiber optic light for lighting. He finds that the 1x objective has an excellent working distance, but kind of smaller when it comes to the 2x objective. He would buy it again and finds it ideal for studying tiny beetles. He's a retired researcher, and he emphasizes utility over high-end features. Caroline Kanaski submitted about her Zeiss STEMI 305 with a 10x eyepiece and a double spot LED light with a KEDU base. This one retails at about $2,500. She uses it for bark beetles and associates. And for lighting, her setup is an attached gooseneck LED lights. Sometimes she lights from above, sometimes from below. She absolutely loves the base because it's ergonomic. Again, this is something I mentioned before. And the integrated gooseneck saves a lot of space on her station. She does sometimes wish it could zoom just a little bit more, but she would absolutely buy it again. She was familiar with it from grad school, wanted that model. She finds the setup to be extremely ergonomic. John Wallace submitted about his Amscope ZM1 series trinocular stereoscope, which is retailing at about $1,050. He uses it for micrometeorites and uses the built-in and side lights. He loves that the zoom goes up to 90x. Again, for his micrometeorite work, it's great. It does have a bit of a poor focus mechanism. He said it went bad after 5 to 6 years. And the optics are okay, but not great. He might buy it again, he might not. And he just wants to note that he's found when you purchase anything on Amazon, the magnification is often exaggerated. John Wallace submitted about a vintage old Russian trinocular scope that he purchased on eBay for about $500. He uses it also for micrometeorites and uses the built-in and side lights. He doesn't really know the optical quality, but he uses it and can verify and image micrometeorites with it. He also submitted about a standalone option. So now we're kind of into the standalone option section. He has the Adon Star AD249SM something digital microscope. He said it costed about $400. He also uses it for micrometeorites. He loves the built-in lighting setup and the simple display for workshops. It's good for customer service. Oh, they have good customer service. He has found a few wiring defects that customer service helped him with, some focusing issues, and he found that the magnification claims were exaggerated. He finds that it's best for objects around greater than or equal to 1 millimeter. It's fun for workshops, but really not good for professional optics. Perry sent this really cool microscope. Perry, I think I saw you with this at the winter workshop and I was intrigued and asked you to email me about it, or maybe someone else had it too. This is the Teslong MS100 USB digital microscope. It retails at around $40. He likes to use it for syrphids, bee flies, and tiger beetles. It has a built-in USB LED that's pretty flexible. He really likes getting flexible angles around pin specimens. The microscope itself is extremely easy to move around. It's great for showing specimens without having to handle them. Limitation is a cold blue light that comes out of the LED, and the colors on the images he takes might require some software adjustment. This is one where I wonder if you had additional goose lights, if you could get some really cool pictures with it. He would definitely buy it again, and even though it connects to the desktop, I think he had given me some instructions I can share if anyone's interested, because at first he thought it only connected to a smartphone, but figured out a way to actually get it to connect to both a Mac and a PC. It's a really great lower cost digital option, great for outreach or casual imaging. Philip Roy submitted about this standalone option, the High-Year HY5299. It's about $400, and he likes to use it for bees, Apis mellifera, and its parasites. It has a built-in lighting source from the picture here. It looks like a little bit of a ring light, which is kind of cool. He likes being able to display the subject on multiple large screens with it. It has a large physical size, which is sort of one of the limitations. And it outputs pretty good for demonstrations or group viewing. Ron Butler submitted some information about just in general, how he feels about the digital, the standalone option, the USB HDMI microscopes like DynaLight or similar. Typically the really good ones are around $500. He likes them for general insect imaging, slides, seminar use, things like that. They typically have built-in LEDs. He likes that they're portable, compact, to record images that are easy to display on a laptop, tablet, or screen. One limitation is you really don't get depth perception. You get 2D images only. And uses softwares for measurements and image stacking. So again, they're small, portable, and inexpensive. This is a photo that he then shows in how much with the USB microscope he can zoom in to that red there. This looks like a dragonfly larva to me. I think it is. The slide he sent that he used to present about these USB microscopes. So if they're, cheaper, they're going to be simple, break down for transport, they have a good camera. This kind of style breaks down, has its own screen and a camera, and then the DynaLight is a lot more expensive, but their software is really sophisticated. The pictures are really high resolution, and you can do that image stacking in that software with that camera. So that means you can get a picture that's not just zoomed in on one thing. You can get like the whole insect. So just some things about that. And so before I sign off here, just broadly some lessons from this microscope survey, which I thought maybe I'd get like one or two answers. Again, thank you all so much. I think Eric included in his email, I love the best microscope is the one you'll actually use. Multiple respondents emphasized usability over maximum specs. Stereoscopes and dissecting scopes, they do have less magnification, but for general insect work, they're really kind of the better choice. Trinoculars are highly valued for photography and documentation, and ergonomics and base design matter for comfort and long-term use. Compound scopes are useful for fine details and fuzzy characteristics, but they're less frequently used for general work. They are something that you can modify with lighting to improve the usability in older scopes. And then those digital standalone microscopes, they're excellent for portability, outreach, easy image sharing. One thing I love to use them for is we have like a pinned collection in the department that I'll bring to events with kids, and I don't have to take the glass top off. I have a very inexpensive DynaLight style microscope that I just hand over to the kids, and I let them look at the screen as they put it over the different insects, and it's really, really fun. Many are inexpensive, but they're going to be trading depth and optical quality. And oftentimes you need to install software for, doing measurements and image stacking. Lighting is crucial. I think I said it enough, but I'll say it again. Lighting is crucial. Ring lights, fiber optics, and LED modifications can really improve imaging. Diffusion or adjustable angles are going to be reducing glare and harsh reflections. Again, that Mylar paper is great for diffusion. Many of the users do compromise due to cost, or they purchase due to, just knowing the microscope they've worked with. But investments in high quality optics can pay off if you're using it really frequently, especially professionally. And just some final takeaways: ergonomics, working distance, and lighting often matter more than sheer magnification. Personal preference and taxa study can really guide your choice. And then for shared work or outreach, digital scopes or trinoculars are invaluable. So that's the end of the talk, but I have one more slide. Taking a completely different thing here. So we have a competition that just opened today. We are going to be working with a new dealer that's going to be able to make lots of different merchandise for Maine Entomological Society. So we have by April 1st, if you want to submit to me by email, mainentosociety@gmail.com. If you want to submit one original artwork with a design that relates to insects, entomology, or the mission of MES. If your artwork is selected, it might be used on shirts, hats, mugs, or other merchandise. We don't know how many we're going to select as winners, but the selected designs that are used on merchandise are going to receive, person is going to receive 1 year of free MES membership and a shirt featuring your design. So, the ideas might include a favorite insect, pollinator or beneficial insect, main insect species, or just fun entomology themed artwork. And you don't have to be a professional artist. Simple sketches, digital art, or graphic designs. We just, this cute picture of the praying mantis here. This is from Canva. I don't want to be just using someone else's clip art. I'd much rather be using even a simple sketch from someone from MES. So that is the end of my talk. I'm happy to take questions, and thank you so much for being here and listening.
And if anybody has any questions, you can either put them in the chat and we can read them, or you can unmute yourself and just ask.
Hi, Hillary. It's Eric.
Hey.
I just had a question about camera obscura for drawing through the microscope. How do you do that with a stereoscope? Do you know? Is that possible?
Camera obscura for drawing.
Familiar with those? It's an old thing that would attach to a compound microscope, and it would show a image of your paper in hand next to your microscope as you look through the objective through the ocular.
Yeah, I don't have experience with that. I'm sorry. That's pretty cool sounding
It's very old fashioned. So
though.
How do you respond?
Hmm?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Gary, I can hear you now.
Yes. I'm Gary, and I don't have a picture up for any reason, but I'm not very good at the computer business. The answer to the camera obscura on a stereo microscope is to use one eyepiece, and you'll lose a stereo effect, but you'll still get the image.
excellent. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
This is Don
Can
Chandler. I believe you're talking about a camera lucida, and I use that all the time.
Yes, I'm sorry. That's exactly what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, amazingly, the camera obscura I've seen used in Portland at the Portland, there's Portland Museum in Portland, and they actually have a camera obscura set up, and it's some way of projecting shadows. But you're talking about a camera lucida, and that requires a separate insert that goes between all the oculars at the top and then the base of the camera. You have to take the top off and then insert this camera lucida part and screw it down. And again, I use it all the time. But photos for genitalic illustrations, I use that. But for photos of specimens, I, of course, use a camera of some sort.
I looked online and found.
You can get them for compound scopes and dissecting microscopes.
Cool.
Usually adds another $600 or $700. Usually, used to.
I told you guys would know more than me. Any other questions?
Where are you based in Maine?
I am.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it's appropriate to offer this or not, but one of the things in your title that brought me to the seminar was buying microscopes without losing your mind. And I think that your presentation was excellent. Um, one of the things that I would add is used microscopes,
Mhm.
and the web is a frightening place as far as I'm concerned for used microscopes because it's filled with overabundant hype and the never-ending threat of whether or not you're going to get what you really
Mhm.
want.
Mhm.
But all your suggestions I thought were right on point, and if you can find a good, reliable nearby source or even a national source that you can trust,
Mhm.
uh, you can stretch your budget dollar by buying older refurbished equipment where the optics are still very good and the mechanics are often a lot better because probably before the year 2000 there was still a lot of stuff being made in Japan and it was still pretty quality microscope
Mhm.
stuff for the everyday user. Once it got to China, it took a nosedive and then it started to improve. But there's a lot of stuff that comes from China, and the reliability is questionable. That
Sure.
I don't want to be a doomsayer here necessarily, but I think that all the scopes you shot probably have a pretty legitimate lifespan. But I always fear for people who are picking up stuff on the web
Mhm.
and with no place to turn once they find out they bought a poke with nothing in it.
Yeah, no, it's a,
So
it's a really good point. Totally.
I don't know how I can help you, but
I guess one
well,
thing
maybe I can just contact you if you're the leader of the group personally,
yeah, sure.
because I've got a lot of used microscopes, and I don't want to make a sales pitch out of this necessarily, but I do have some thoughts on that that may or may not be appropriate for this group.
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay, good, thank you.
I will say, I think one thing that can be useful, if you don't have a microscope, but you want to get one, but you haven't used one a ton, um, going to places like the doors often open at places like the Maine State Museum to come help out with the insect collection and get your feet wet with microscopes. And once you use microscopes for a little while, you kind of get a taste of what you prefer and what you want to look for. So that can also be pretty helpful. I think it probably took me 5+ years to really um, decide what I liked in a microscope and what I didn't like. And by then I was ready to get my own. So sometimes it takes a little while to really figure it out.
Curious too, it may be good to look into like I feel like if you were trying to find a used one, I bet if you talk to a lot of professors that kind of inherited labs with a lot of old equipment, they might be willing to sell you one. I don't know.
You have to be very careful about used microscopes from universities and colleges,
Hmm.
but your suggestion is good. And then if you can find some reliable, trustworthy person to give you an assessment
Hmm.
and maybe bring it up to speed, because I'm a big believer in older microscopes. They're
Sure.
gemstones compared to what you're finding on the regular market, and very often the optics haven't deteriorated. Many
Hmm.
times they have, but very often they've not. And I've got some really old microscopes that still deliver excellent images. Um, it's just because of the way you treat them. So if you use them for a doorstop, you understand that. But if you keep a bag over them, clean them once in a while, you'll have a lot better luck. But
Sure.
You don't need to have a lot of bells and whistles, but you do need to have some reliability in the mechanics and the optics.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm all for used stuff, and you can very often multiply your effects pretty easily and still save a few dollars and get a microscope that'll probably outlast you.
Totally. Great. Those are really good tips.
I'll also just offer if anybody's in northern Maine, I'm in Fort Kent, so that's really northern. But like if anyone emailed me and wanted to check out, like I probably have 5 or 6 different types of microscopes that I have my students using in general entomology. Um, and I make them switch it up every week. I'm like, you can't, try one scope, see if you like it. But if someone emailed me and said they were in the area and wanted to check out scopes, I would absolutely show you a bunch.
Cool. Thank you. What do you teach up at UMaine?
I'm technically I'm a professor of forestry.
Mhm.
Um and so I teach within like entomology stuff too. I teach like forest health, which kind of includes forest entomology. Teaching general entomology right now, and I also teach like dendrology and forest ecology.
Great. Nice. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Could you
So
send
this
me a pine tree?
Oh, pardon me. Yeah, this is Jim Labonte. I have a tip on insect manipulation. I've used the various insect manipulation tools for pin specimens over the years, and I really have decided that I like a ball of um, floral display clay, where they stick the stems in, because it's kind of stiff, and so it'll hold a pin really well, and I can maneuver it minutely
Cool.
just by, of course, touching the head of the pin and shifting things around a little bit. So, the cheap tip.
That's a great idea. Looking up a picture of you said floral display clay. Like oh yeah, okay. Share a picture of that just in case anyone's not familiar with it. Great. Well, thank you so much again, everyone, for coming and for everyone that submitted. I kept like telling my husband, I'm like, someone else sent me a microscope. That brought me like genuine joy for the last like, 3 weeks. So thank you all. MES is awesome.
Yeah, and thank you, Hillary. That was a great talk.
Yeah,
That's
thanks for
nice.
putting it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we get the recording of this up on the website, I'll put the PDF of the talk up so people can use it like a guide or whatever.
Yeah, I really like the slide you did about the hand lens. I always recommend students to get it for like dendrology or just, any kind of like naturalist or like outdoor classes. But no one usually gets it. So I think maybe if they knew how to use it, they might like it better.
Yeah, yeah. I gotta play with trying to take pictures through it.
Actually, I
I think that
bought a
was
cheap
always.
one. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, that was always my problem. I never use a hand lens because I never know how to use it right.
Yeah, I bought a really cheap one. I put it on my key ring with my car keys, which like that's not something that you want to like hold up next to your face, but I actually have it when I need it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'll have to get MES branded, like with our new merch store. We'll tell the
Okay, wait. I actually have a really good item idea. Um I don't know if anybody I never knew this was a thing, but like a stretchy elastic chapstick holder for your keychain.
uh,
There's like one brand of vial I have found that I can preload a vial with
oh,
ethanol and keep it on my keychain in the chapstick holder.
that's pretty
And
cool.
I made like a set of 10, but I ran out of the vials that I need. So I mean, and they only come in packs of like 1,000. I don't have $1,000 to buy vials. Maybe like I don't know, as a group we can go in on
That's a
it.
good idea. I like that idea.
I don't have a prototype right now either, but yeah, I just because that's the other thing, like trying to get students to like go out and collect insects,
Yeah,
but like, they're like, oh, but I didn't have it with me.
yeah.
Didn't
I
have
wonder
a
if you could
vial.
you could design something to 3D print too.
Ooh,
That could be
that'd be
fun.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap things up here. And thank you again so much. And reach out if you have any questions.
And I will remind everybody just one more time, March 29th is our first field event of the season. So feel free to come out to that. There's information about that on the Maine Entomological Society website. And we send out some reminders about it as we move towards it. I know like the weekly four wing might have something about it in it. And the recent newsletter we'll talk about a little bit. And our lovely secretary, Anna Court, will send out messages to any membership about upcoming events. So,
If anyone here is not a member, I put the join link in the chat.
well, awesome. Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's a lovely, lovely chat, and have a good rest of your nights.
Have a good one.